All right, I heard last week you guys learned some actions to our memory verse. We're not going to do that straight away. We're going to do something a bit different first. We're going to do a bit of a challenge, okay? Because the point of a memory verse is you're meant to memorize the verse. So there's no point in doing it if you can't remember what it says. So we're going to challenge you a bit, okay? I have a slide that's going to come up. And I'm going to ask you guys if there's any volunteers who would like to come up and have a go at our challenge. There will be a prize. So if you think you can compete in this challenge, it is worth coming up. All right, so on the screen, we have the first letter of every word in our memory verse, okay? So I'll give you guys a bit of time to think, have a look, see if you can work it out, and then anyone who wants to... Angus, don't give it away, then you can't win, okay? In maybe a minute or so, I'll invite anyone who wants to come up and have a go up on the stage to say our memory verse just using the first letter of each word. All right, have a practice. Don't give it away to the person next to you though, that's awkward. I know at least one person here can do this, so... All right, Hannah thinks the last word is Hebrews. I mean, maybe. Oh, nice. All right, is there anyone who would like to volunteer to come up and have a go? You can look at it on the screen, like it's on the screen at the back, it's on the screen there. You want to have a go, Trinity? 4.5 lines. One, oh, you're close. Do you want to come up and have a try and see if you can do it? All right, give Trinity a hand. Woo. Righty.
For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace. And then I don't know the rest. To help us to help us in our time of need. Hebrews 4:15-16.
Good job. All right, does anyone else think they want to have a go? Now that you've heard Trinity say it, it might have refreshed your memory. Zane? Yeah? Come up, give Zane a hand. Woo! I gave you a hand. I don't know if anyone else did. All right.
Oh, it's there too. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses. But... I'm done. I'm not good at this.
All right, give him a hand. He did a pretty good job. Nice. Lisa? Give Lisa a hand. Woo!
For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Hebrews 4:15-16. I know as much as Trinity did at the beginning.
Nice. But now you've had it a few times. All right, maybe one more person. Anyone else want to have a go? Yep, come up. Give Josh a clap.
For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15-16.
All right, I think I have 3 winners of that. Good work, guys. Keep memorizing that verse.
That was absolutely fantastic. It's so cool to hear you guys from youth who are not even adults yet memorizing parts of God's word, and that'll stick with you for the rest of your life, which is so cool. Speaking of God's word, I'm going to read the passage which we're talking about tonight. So here's your opportunity to get out your phones if you want to have a look at the Bible. Otherwise, just keep them closed. Just be responsible. You know the drill. All right. So this comes from Hebrews 12. We're starting at verse 18. And it says, "You have not come to a mountain that can be touched and that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm, to a trumpet blast or to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken to them, because they could not hear what was commanded. Even if an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned to death. The sight was so terrifying that Moses said, 'I'm trembling with fear.' But you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You have come to the thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when he refused him who warned them on earth, how much less will we if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven? At that time his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, 'Once more I will not shake only the earth, but also the heavens.' The words 'once more' indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful, and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe. For our God is a consuming fire."
Thank you. All right, I want to do a quick show of hands with you guys. So we do a couple of camps here every year. We've got summer camp coming up. Hopefully we've got Kick coming up again next year, which will be awesome to be back on. When we go away, summer camp, we go, not anymore, we used to go, and we'll do this as a day trip. We go to the beach, right? So if you haven't been to summer camp, heads up, on the first day we go to the beach. It's pretty good. When we go to Kick, we don't go anywhere near a beach, right? We go to the mountains. You got a couple of other options. If you're going on holidays, you could go maybe to the city, or you could go to the country, right? For my holidays, when I was off a couple of weeks ago, I went and did a farm stay with my little girls so they could play with baby alpacas, baby goats, stuff like that, right? I'm really keen to see from you guys, if I were to give you those 4 categories, going to the city, going to the country, going to the mountains, or going to the beach for a holiday, which one would you choose? Right, take a second. I'm going to do a vote. We're going to do vote by volume so that passionate people can get more for their votes, right? Let's start with my recent holiday. So again, vocalize. You can vote for as many as you want. You can cheer for as many as you want, but make your cheer proportionate to how much you like it. Who here would like to go on holidays to the country? Yeah, there you go. Who would like to go on a holiday to the city? No? Yeah? Not big, not big. Who would like to go on a holiday to the mountains? Anyone? That's such an old person thing, right? I want to go to the mountains. Who would like to go on a holiday to the beach? Sorry, Josh, that's the last time I'll ask. I kind of expected that to be the case, right? If I'm talking to old people, a lot of us, I'm one of them, we do like to go to the mountains, but generally, like, we've never thought, you know what, for summer camp, let's go to Katoomba. Everyone will love that, right? We thought, let's go to the beach. We're not big fans of going to the mountains. Yet, if you were paying attention, well, I don't know if you were, to the part of the Bible that was just read out to us, it wasn't talking about the beach, right? It wasn't saying you've come to a beach. It actually said we've come to a mountain, right? And actually it goes on to talk about 2 mountains. Our theme for tonight, if you want to lock it in your heads, is a tale of 2 different mountains, right? And we're not talking about going on holidays, right? I get that we wouldn't choose to go so that we can look out at the 3 sisters or whatever if we got our choice of holiday. But these mountains that we're going to be talking about tonight, 2 things you need to know about them. They are real places. But they're actual, just legit mountains that you could hop on a plane and go and fly and see those particular mountains. But at the same time, the mountains that we're going to be talking about tonight, because the mountains that we're going to be talking about are more than just places that you could look up on Google Maps, right? These mountains that we're going to be talking about are actually the very heart. There's this is verse 18. It says, you've not come to a mountain. So here's our first one. It's the one we haven't come to, right? And we'll think more about that later. But some people have come to this mountain. In fact, let me just tell you, in case you want to Google it, this mountain isn't named in this passage, so you don't know what to look up on Google Maps, right? But the mountain that is pretty clear is being talked about here is Mount Sinai, right? Mount Sinai, which is the mountain that Moses took the Israelites to, that he went up on and got the Ten Commandments, right? Where God spoke the Ten Commandments to all of Israel, and where then he wrote it down on stone and gave a whole bunch of other instructions to Moses, who then came down the mountain, right? Anyone who was with us, was it last term we did Exodus? I'll lose track in 2020 and 2021. But at some point recently, we did Exodus, right? And you guys might remember some of that story of Moses. That's the mountain that's being talked about here, right? So we could fly over to the Middle East and see this particular mountain. What do we learn about it, though? First thing, what kind of mountain is it? Let's look at the top line. You've not come to a mountain that can be touched, right? Now, remember I said that these mountains we're talking about are going to mean more than just like the actual physical mountain. There's going to be a bit more depth to it. Here's something we need to know about what it was like to approach God, what it was like to come to God, what it was like to be his people, what it was like to hear from him back then in the days of Exodus. It was something that could be touched. It was a real mountain that they walked to. There was something physical about it. It was an actual location. So the first thing about this mountain is it is physical. What that means, if we pull it out, not just the mountain, but all the stuff that we're going to learn about these mountains tonight, what does it look like to know God? What is he like? What's it look like to be his people? What is our faith all on about? For those people who approached that mountain, faith, relationship with God, was super physical. How did you know if you were one of God's people in the Old Testament back there in Exodus? Your mum and dad were God's people. Your grandparents were God's people. You could get a DNA test to see whether or not you were one of God's people, because it was a particular racial group, right? The Jews. They were descendants of a guy named Abraham. It was biological participation in the people of God, right? Incredibly physical. Not just how do you become one of God's people and who are God's people. They're physically, let's say the promised land in the Old Testament. The promised land was a physical place. They came out of Egypt. God delivered them physically out of slavery, which was physical slavery. He moved the physical water out of their way so that they could walk through a physical desert, go to a physical mountain that could be touched, and then progress from there to a physical land, which was really nice. Lots of green grass, lots of great farming land, and a really pleasant place to live. And that was their promised land, right? It was all physical stuff. What about God's enemies in the Old Testament? Physical, real, tangible, in front of them, people. So who did David fight? Goliath, a real big dude, right? Just a physical enemy right in front of him. All of these things in the Old Testament were real physical things, tangible things that they could touch. Just like in our passage it says. Even the sacrifices and the whole way that they came to God. There was a physical building that had physical purple sheets and goat skin and stuff like that over the top. And they would have a sheep, and it was a real live sheep, right? And they would drag it along, or they'd have a rope around its neck to lead it along to be sacrificed physically. The Old Testament, when we read it, their way of coming to God was about genetics and places and tasks and things to do, right? It was a very physical way of coming to God. And actually that matters for us to recognize, because sometimes when we read the Old Testament, we realize that's not like that for us, right? We'll think more about that as we go on. But for them, it was physical. Let's keep going. What's the vibe of the place? We haven't come to a mountain that can be touched, physical, that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm. What's the vibe of this place? The moment in history that this is talking about, when Moses and the Israelites are at the mountain, God comes and makes himself known on that mountain. And that's a description of what it was like, right? Blazing fire, think lightning and thunderclouds and darkness and rain and deafening roaring sounds, right? God in all of his power revealed on the top of this mountain over in the Middle East. And so what was the vibe of it? Burning with fire. That's terrifying, isn't it? That's destructive. And yet, even though it's burning with fire, it's dark. I think lonely, sad, despairing. A place where when people approached God at this physical location, it was weighty and dark and terrifying. To the point we're told in this passage that even Moses himself, the only thing he can come up with to say is, I am terrified and trembling. That's the vibe of what it was like in the Old Testament to come to God. When God's people came to him, it was rightly scary. What is spoken there, and maybe that'll tie back into where that vibe came from. What's it say was spoken? Let's find number 19. We're up to that, weren't we? It says, to a trumpet blast or to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken to them. Right, first, the reaction, right? When God spoke at that mountain, his people hated it because they were terrified, because it hurt, and they begged, saying, please, no more. Right? That was what was spoken. Now, why? Because they couldn't bear what was commanded. If even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned to death. Right? What was this mountain characterized by? Restrictions. You can't come here. God's here, and you're excluded from his presence. This is the line, and if you cross it, if you break that rule, you die. And so what was the vibe of the place? Terrifying, dark, lonely. This is this first mountain, and what's the right response of the people? When they approached God in that way, the sight was so terrifying that Moses said, I'm trembling with fear. There's the first mountain. Now, there's something important that we need to see in this verse, right? In this passage. And it's right there at the top. And I didn't say much on it, but we need to, right? What does the very start of this entire passage say to us? It says, you have not come to this mountain, right? You have not come to this mountain. The reason that's important is because there's ways in which, when I think about my faith in God, when I think about my attitude to God, the way I think about him, sometimes my faith feels a little bit like this mountain. Only a little bit, sometimes more. There's times where I have broken one of God's rules, and I think that the right response is that I should be afraid because God is terrifying, because he said this is the rule, and if you break it, you will die. And so what actually creeps into my faith, my way of relating to God, is fear. That actually characterizes, and maybe fear is too strong a word. Maybe for you, what creeps into your relationship with God is a smaller level of fear, and the name we would give it is anxiety, right? Anxiousness. A worry that says, am I good enough for God? Because he's given rules. He's said how to approach him. I've broken those rules. And I know that he's a God who is holy and perfect, and in between me and him is just a killing zone, right? And unless I'm perfect to get across that killing zone, I'm doomed. And so an anxiety sits in our heart saying, am I really good enough for him? Or in that particular moment, is this the time I've crossed a line that I can't come back from? If there's a glimmer of that for you tonight, that as you think about your faith, as you think about your attitude to God, right? When you think about God and when you think about coming to him, what picture of him do you have? What do you think his attitude to you is? If underneath, in amongst that, is fear, worry, trembling, then I think tonight's a super important night for you. Because what did our passage start with? You have not come to this mountain. That way of coming to God is not the way that we are coming to God. This is a letter written to Christians, people who understand the gospel that we tell you guys about and we're about to talk about. And the author says to Christians, this is not our faith. And so if you notice this sneaking in, cut it out. I'll tell you what to replace it with. Right? Let's have a look at mountain number 2. Where have we come instead? So we'll ask the same questions, right? What kind of mountain? The first one was a physical one, right? What's the vibe? The first one was pretty bleak, pretty dark, pretty terrifying. And what was said? Rules and restrictions that lead to death, right? That was the first mountain. We'll ask the same question about this second mountain. First up, what kind of mountain is it? But you have come to Mount Zion. Has anyone heard of Mount Zion? Anyone know? Maybe some of you might have heard the words. Let me help you out because they'll sound random to you, but everyone back then knew what it was referring to. It's the mountain that Jerusalem's built on. If you've ever heard of Jerusalem, like the capital city of Israel, right? It's built on a mountain, and that mountain is called Mount Zion, right? So this city was built, this is the place that Jesus died on the cross, there at Jerusalem at Mount Zion. So at the moment, it seems like it's the same kind of mountain, right? Because you could hop on a plane, fly to Israel, and visit Mount Zion, except it says this. You've come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, what's the word there? Heavenly Jerusalem, right? Heavenly Jerusalem. Because here's the thing. I don't know about you guys. In this moment, I have not come to the mountain in Israel called Mount Zion, right? I've never been there. Most of the people reading this letter historically have never actually been there. It's not talking about a physical place that we've come to. What sort of mountain is this one talking about? It's talking about something spiritual instead. Right? And actually what we're going to kind of think about, unpack from that is this difference from the Old Testament to the New Testament, that in the Old Testament things were physical, but they were just shadows of all relationship with God. So that's the difference with this particular mountain. It's the heavenly Jerusalem. What about the vibe? Have a look there at the vibe. What's this place like? Remember the last place was dark and dangerous and despairing. What about this one? You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn. That's the way of saying Jesus, right? To Jesus' church, whose names are written in heaven. You've come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, and to Jesus. And we'll get to that in a sec. What's the vibe of this place? Where the other place was a barren killing ground, right, of just dead animals and dead rocks, what's this place? This is a mountain filled with life and joy. Right? Thousands upon thousands, multitudes upon multitudes of different kinds of beings, angels and people, all having a party, right? Life and joy. Our faith isn't about fear and rules. It's about life and joy. And notice what it said at the start. It says, you have come to this place. If you're someone who knows Jesus, this isn't a statement about what will be in the future once you die or when Jesus comes back. Right? This is not a statement about physical one day. This is a statement about spiritual now. And so it says you have come to this spiritual place. That means, where are we at spiritually? Like physically, we're in Quakers Hill. Can't do much about that, right? Spiritually, where are we? United with angels who are partying. What's to say? The church, as in all other people all over this planet who believe in Jesus and form his body, right? We're spiritually united with them. We're united with God himself, and we're united with all those who have already died. What's it say? The spirits of the righteous made perfect. Right? The spiritual reality of where you're at now is that you're united with partying angels, believers all over the planet, and billions of people in history who've trusted in God, been saved by Jesus, and have been made perfect in eternity, and you're united with God himself. One cool thing to notice in that, like for a start, I think that's exciting, right? That's what our faith means for us spiritually. But there's also a cool thing that we just got to grab on the way, and it's just the last couple of words of verse 23. Why don't you have a look at the last couple of words of verse 23? This is just a bit of a drive-by. Notice this bit as we go past. Notice what it says. It says that part of who we're united with is the spirit of the righteous made perfect. People who've died, and they're called the righteous, but it doesn't say the spirits of the perfect, does it? right? United with, the people who are connected with God for all eternity are perfect people. Who are they? People who've been made perfect. Those who've been made perfect. This is why that's important. To be united with God, to get to participate in all of this joy with the angels and with all of the church and with all the people who've been saved and connected with God himself and all of the joy and partying that goes with that you be perfect. There's not a set of rules that you have to keep. The first mountain, Mount Sinai, rules, or second mountain, doesn't say, if you keep the rules, you get in. What does it actually say? It says, if you get in, then you get made perfect. That's different, and here's the difference that I was racking my mind trying to think of an illustration that might help us not get that mixed up. Here's what I was thinking. Summer camp's coming up. Who's coming to summer camp, by the way? Woo! Summer camp, you've got to buy a ticket, right? And there's a risk that we think that our perfection, us being good enough, us keeping all of the rules, is like our ticket to get into heaven. You know you're falling into that trap if you think that when you die, there's going to be any situation where God looks at whether you've been good enough or not good enough to get in, right? If you think that when you die, there's going to be a situation where God will look at whether you're good enough or not good enough, how many sins you've done and how much good stuff, and he's going to weigh that up in any way, and that's what's going to decide whether you get in, you've made this mistake. You've thought that your goodness, your perfection, is your ticket to get into heaven. When you come along to summer camp, if I get my act together and do a little bit of graphic design and send an order off, is there anyone here tonight who's wearing an old summer camp shirt? They crop up every now and then at youth group. When you guys come to youth group, we're going to give you a shirt, right? And it's going to have some stuff about summer camp, and we'll wear it, and it can go in the pajama drawer. But here's what I want you guys to realize. Being perfect, being righteous, being good enough for God is more like the t-shirt at camp than the ticket, right? As in, being good enough for God is not how you get into heaven, but it's what happens to you once you get into heaven. That we turn up at heaven, and if we get into heaven, God then goes, now have this, and gives us perfection, clothes us in perfection. That begs the question then, what's the ticket? If you being good enough isn't how you get into heaven, how do you get into heaven? Let's finish talking about this mountain and you'll get the answer to that question. What did we say? What kind of mountain is it? It's a spiritual one. What's the vibe of this mountain? Joyful partying, right? What's the message? What's spoken at this mountain? Let's look at the end. Verse 24. We've come to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. Isn't that odd? We've come to sprinkled blood that speaks. Like, that's a weird thing to just say and to try and process, that Jesus' blood speaks. Let me tell you a little story about the end of this and see if it helps. It says that it speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. Does anyone know who Abel is? Some of you guys know? Who was Abel? Adam and Eve's son, yeah? One of their first two sons, right? They had Cain and Abel, two boys. Had a little bit of a family disagreement. We won't get into that for the purpose of tonight. But the end result is what? Cain murders Abel, right? Out in the field. So Abel is the first murder in all of human history, right? The first time human blood was shed. And it was by another human, by his own brother. And God turns up and he's like, yo, Cain, where's Abel? And Cain's like, I don't know, am I meant to be keeping track of my brother the whole time? I don't know where he's gone, right? And God's response is he says to Cain, your brother's blood is crying out to me, right? God sees everything, he knows everything, and Abel's blood that has been splattered across the ground is crying out. And what does it cry out for? Well, what is it that God gives to Cain? Firstly, it cries out and it says, guilty. Cain can say, I don't know where my brother is. But Abel's blood is soaking the ground in the field. And that blood says, Cain is guilty. Not only does it say Cain is guilty, but it cries out for vengeance, saying Abel should be avenged. There should be punishment. And what does it lead to? God curses Cain, right? That first blood, Abel's blood, cried out saying, guilty, vengeance, curse. And what's the author here say? Jesus' blood, shed on the cross, says something different, right? Speaks a better word than that. Because what is it that Jesus' blood speaks? What is it that the message is? I don't know if you've ever thought about this, because it's weird to say Jesus' blood speaks, isn't it? Which means I would guess that none of you have spent much time thinking, what does Jesus' blood say? What does it say to God? What does it say to me? What does it say about me? Put thought into it. But for now, let me start with some simple stuff, some deep, profound stuff. You know the resounding message of Jesus' blood as it dripped from his hands and his feet and out of his side and down his scoured back? The message it spoke was, I love them this much. Right? From him, that was to God. To you, it was, I love you this much. Right? It was, any vengeance, God, which you need to pour it out on me, not them. Leave nothing left of your anger for Josh Wilson. Pour it all out on me. That's what his blood says. Right? It says that he loves me. It says that he forgives me. It says that he washes away every single time that I fall short. Right? Washes me clean. Irony, right? Washes me clean by his blood. The Bible says another message of it is that he's purchased me by it. That because he paid for all of my sins with that blood, he's now bought me and I belong to him. Right? That's the message that drips into the dirt on this second mountain. What is it we're meant to do if that's the case, right? If we're part of this gatheredness of all of the church, partying with angels, connected with all the people who've loved Jesus in the past, and the way that has happened is by Jesus' blood. And that blood is yelling a message to you guys about how much God loves you, about how much he cares for you, about how far he will always go for your good, about how he'll never leave you and forsake you. If that's the message being cried out by Jesus' blood, then what should we do? Let's see, I think I got the next verse will come up. If Jesus' blood is screaming that message out to us, what should we do about it? See to it that you don't refuse him. See to it that you die. What to say? See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks and finite. It's the broken man giving his life on a cross for you. And he speaks that message. And his words, I love you, I forgive you, I'll cleanse you. Don't refuse him. Because there is no hope left for us if we hear that message from God and walk away. If we've heard not just the law, but we know that we've fallen short, we're not going to be the perfect ones. Jesus has done all that for us. He loves us. He offers us that grace and mercy and being washed clean and brought into his kingdom. And if we see all of that and say, no thanks, there's no hope left for us. So, see to it that you don't refuse him who speaks. Why does that matter? Because this is the back end of the reading that Ella had for us tonight. Because things are going to get shaken up. Right? That's what the author says. Here's how he says it. He says, at that time, mountain number 1, Mount Sinai, God speaks from there. It says, at that time his voice shook the earth. But now he has promised, once more I will shake not only the earth, but the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is created things, so that what cannot be shaken might remain. If you didn't track with that, here's the logic. God's going to shake everything one last time. Right? That's what the once more is saying, one last time, God's going to shake things. And we don't mean shake things up just in like, oh, let's have some fun, shake things up, right? Because what is the end result? So that only what cannot be shaken may remain. God is going to shake up creation in a way that anything that can be shaken up is destroyed. Anything which is not firm and solid and unyielding will be gone. What does he say that is? That is, created things. All of creation will be shaken up. Now this kind of lands, I think, I don't know if this is scary or helpful way for me just thinking about the last couple of years. Because these last couple of years, like 2020 and 2021, everything's been shaken, right? I don't know what your own individual stories of that are like, but a lot of things that we thought were solid, we've realized aren't that solid. Whether that's like we're sitting in the Western world thinking that our health is all solid or our finances are all solid, or whether that's you sitting in a family thinking that your family was solid, right? Or your friendships were solid. Your grades were solid. Your plans for your career based on your school performance were solid. Like, I don't know what the thing is. Your job was solid. Your best friend, your relationship, your boyfriend or girlfriend, you thought that was solid. And these last few years have just shaken stuff in actually a pretty little way. And they've revealed that stuff can get shaken and fall apart around us. And so the idea that one day in the future, God's going to get rid of all the stuff that can be shaken, and the only things that will be left will be things that cannot be shaken, that we can trust in, that we can depend on. I'm actually kind of keen for that. I'm actually kind of keen for a time when nothing can be shaken up yet. What is it that will be left, though? What's to say? Only the things that cannot be shaken. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, there's a time in the future where God is going to come and interact with all of creation in a way that most of it is destroyed. Most of it is gone. And it is stripped back to Jesus and his kingdom. And then we know from other parts of Scripture that Jesus is going to recreate. Just like he made everything from nothing the first time, there will be a new heavens and a new earth. God is going to make it all, and he's going to make it glorious. It's going to be beautiful. There's going to be no sin, no suffering, no brokenness, none of the things that are shakeable. He's going to make all things good. But what does that mean for us in the meantime? It means I sure as heck want to live my life leaning into, getting as involved as I can, pouring my heart and my life into the things that can't be shaken. Into the things that can't be shaken. There's an example of this in the passage. I'll just tell you quickly. It was before the bit we wrote. It's a warning about a guy named Esau. Quick flick of hands. Anyone heard of Esau? Did I put his story in here? Let's see. Yeah. Some of you heard of Esau. See that no one is sexually immoral or is godless like Esau, who for a single meal sold his inheritance rights as the oldest son. Here's what happened. There's a guy named Jacob. Abraham has Isaac. Isaac has Jacob. He has a brother, Esau, right? Esau is actually the firstborn son. Cut a very long story short, that means that Esau is going to inherit massive, epic, long-range promises from God. Right? He's going to be, like, God's people will be defined as his kids, right? All of the blessings of God are going to flow through him, right? You know the list back in Hebrews 11 of all of the great heroes of the faith? Esau's name was meant to be in that list, right? But he had a brother, Jacob. Esau had all of that, all those promises of being a part of the people and promises of God. You know what Jacob had? A bowl of soup. And Jacob said, swap. And Esau was hungry. So he said yes. He gave it all up. Go back and read Hebrews 11 if you want. He's not in there. Isaac and Jacob are in there. Esau's not mentioned, right? Because he gave up the promises of God. He gave up being one of God's people. What did he give it up for? Something that could be touched, right? Something physical. Bowl of soup. Something that can be shaken, something that won't last. Right? And on the one hand, we think he's an idiot, and on the other hand, we do the same thing every day. Right? We set aside the things of God for bowls of soup, for things that will be shaken when Jesus comes back, for things that won't last into eternity. So where does that leave us tonight? On the one hand, we have, I don't know what the thing that can be touched, tasted, seen, whatever for you is. The bowl of soup. What's your bowl of soup? Sometimes you're tempted to give up on God, to walk out of relationship with Him. Is it as simple as school grades and success there that kind of make it too hard to have enough time to prioritize God? Is it another person, boyfriend or girlfriend, or not yet boyfriend, not yet girlfriend? Is it just money, clothes, stuff, career? I don't know what, right? What's that bowl of soup for you? Because on the one hand, we have the stuff that we want, the stuff we can touch, but the stuff that's going to be destroyed. And on the other hand, we have Jesus on the cross with His blood dripping for us, crying out that He loves us. And you've got a decision which of those you're going to listen to. And the call there is, listen to Jesus. Don't waste your life on things that can be shaken. They'll be shaken in His life. You'll trust those things. You'll pursue those things. You'll base your life on them, and then they'll be shaken and fall over, and you will have wasted it all, and you'll be heartbroken. And even if that doesn't happen, they'll be shaken in eternity. They won't be there. What mountain do we come to? When you think about God, what's our faith? What is Christianity? What is faith to you? It's looking away from the things of this world and just fixing our eyes on Jesus and hearing His message to you. Right? Hearing the words that His blood speaks to you. That you're loved, that you're forgiven. And you would just live accepting that and centering your life on that. And the response at the end of the passage is just that we then are grateful and live out our entire life out of that gratefulness to Him. Right? I'm going to stop there and we're going to go to small groups. And I want you guys to talk about where this actually lands for you, right? Is there a level where the first mountain dominates your thinking about God and you think it's all about rules and death? Do you understand the second mountain? What it is to be one of God's people now in spirit, and that's all because of Jesus' blood, and His blood is screaming a message to you about giving up the things of this world and living for those things that can't be shaken. Where does that actually land for you? Saturday, Sunday, Monday? I'm going to pray for you guys, and then we're going to split into our small groups, spend the rest of the night just talking about where it lands for you. Let's pray. God, thank you that you have shown yourself to humanity. We do thank you that you showed yourself on Mount Sinai, that you showed your power, that you showed your glory, that in the laying down of those rules and the punishment for us, you showed us what things ought to be like. But thank you so much for that second mountain. Jesus, thank you that you stepped in, that you took our place, you made it possible for us to be forgiven. That by your blood, you bought us salvation and forgiveness and mercy. Jesus, please help us to hear the message of that blood, of your sacrifice, of the suffering that you went through out of love for us. Help everyone in this room to hear loud and clear the message of your love for them in a way that changes their lives. Not just now, but even once you come back and even once you shake everything up, I pray that they will be part of that kingdom that won't be shaken. And I ask that, Jesus, in your precious name. Amen. I'll go for it, guys.